want to dismantle the altar now. Everything. Every Sunday. Full.
Chapter 12. Madhya Lila. The cleansing of the Gundicha temple. In his Amrita Prabhasya, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur summarizes this chapter as follows. The king of Orissa, Maharaj Prataparudra, tried his best to see Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Nityananda Prabhu and the other devotees informed the Lord about the king's desire, but Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would not agree to see him. At that time, Sri Nityananda Prabhu devised a plan, and he sent a piece of the Lord's outer garment to the king. The next day, when Ramananda Roy again entreated Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to see the king, the Lord, denying the request, asked Ramananda Roy to bring the king's son before him. The prince visited the Lord, dressed like a Vaishnava, and this awakened remembrance of Krishna. Thus, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu delivered the son of Maharaj Prataparudra. After this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu washed the Gundicha house before the Rath Yatra took place. He then took his bath at Indradumna and partook of prasad in the garden nearby. While Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu washed the temple of Gundicha, some Gaudiya Vaishnavas washed the lotus feet of the Lord and drank the water. This incident is very significant, for it awoke within the devotee ecstatic love. Then again, the son of Advaita Prabhu named Gopal fainted during kirtan, and when he did not come to his senses, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu favored him by awakening him. There was also some humorous talk between Nityananda Prabhu and Advaita Prabhu during prasad. Advaita Prabhu said that Nityananda Prabhu was unknown to anyone, and it was not the duty of a household brahmana to accept dinner with a person unknown in society. In answer to this humorous statement, Sri Nityananda Prabhu replied that Advaita Acharya was a monist, and that one could not know how his mind could be turned by eating with such an impersonalist monist. The conversation between these two Prabhus, Nityananda Prabhu and Advaita Prabhu, carried a deep meaning that only an intelligent man can understand. After all the Vaishnavas finished their luncheon, Dhira Damodara and others took their prasad within the room. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took great pleasure when he saw the Jagannath deity after the deity's retirement. At that time he was accompanied by all the devotees, and all of them were very pleased. Text 1. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu washed and cleansed the Gundicha temple with his devotees and associates. In this way, he made the temple as cool and bright as his own heart, and thus he made the place befitting for Lord Shri Krishna to sit. Text 2. All glories to Gaurachandra, all glories to Nityananda, all glories to Advaita Chandra, and all glories to the devotees of Lord Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 3. All glories to the devotees of Lord Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, headed by Srivas Thakur. I beg their power so that I can properly describe Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 4. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu returned from his South Indian tour, Maharaj Prataparudra, the king of Orissa, became very anxious to meet him. Text 5. The king sent a letter from his capital, Cuttack, to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, entreating him to obtain the Lord's permission so that he could go and see him. Text 6. Replying to the king's letter, Bhattacharya wrote that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had not given his permission. After this, the king wrote him another letter. Text 7. In this letter, the king requested Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, quote, please appeal to all the devotees associated with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and submit this petition to them on my behalf. Text 8. Quote, if all the devotees associated with the Lord are favorably disposed toward me, they can submit my petition at the lotus feet of the Lord. Text 9. Quote, by the mercy of all the devotees, one can attain the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. Without his mercy, my kingdom does not appeal to me. Text 10. If Gaur Hari, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, will not show mercy to me, I shall give up my kingdom, become a mendicant, and beg from door to door. End quote. Text 11. When Bhattacharya received this letter, he became very anxious. He then took the letter and went to the devotees of the Lord. Text 12. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya met with all the devotees and described the king's wishes. He then presented the letter to all of them for inspection. Text 13. Upon reading the letter, everyone was astonished to see that King Prataparudra had so much devotion for the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 14. The devotees gave their opinion and said, quote, "The Lord would never meet with the king, and if we requested him to do so, the Lord would surely feel very unhappy." End quote. Text 15. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya then said, quote, "We shall go once again to the Lord, but we shall not request him to meet the king. Rather, we shall simply describe the good behavior of the king." End quote. Text 16. Having thus reached a decision, they all went to the place of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There, although ready to speak, they could not even utter a word. Text 17. After they arrived at Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's place, the Lord, seeing them, said, quote, "What have you all come here to say? I see that you want to say something, but you do not speak. What is the reason?" End quote. Text 18. Nityananda Prabhu then said, quote, "We want to tell you something. Although we cannot stay without speaking, we are still very much afraid to speak." Text 19. Quote, "We want to submit before you something that may or may not be befitting. The matter is this. Unless he sees you, the king of Orissa will become a mendicant." End quote. Text 20. Nityananda Prabhu continued, quote, "The king has decided to become a mendicant and accept the sign of a mendicant by wearing an ivory earring. He does not want to enjoy his kingdom without seeing the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu." End quote. Purport. In India, there is a class of professional mendicants who are very much like the gypsies of Western countries. They know some magical art and mystical processes, and their business is to beg from door to door, sometimes pleading and sometimes threatening. Such mendicants are sometimes called yogis and sometimes kanapata yogis. The word kanapata refers to one who has put a hole in his ear to wear an earring made of ivory. Maharaj Prataparudra was so depressed by not getting to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that he decided to become such a yogi. Ordinary men think that a yogi must have an ivory earring in his ear, but this is not the sign of a real yogi. Maharaj Prataparudra also thought that to become a mendicant yogi, one must wear such an earring. Text 21. Nityananda Prabhu continued, "The king also expressed his desire to see the moon-like face of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to his eyes' full satisfaction. He would like to raise the lotus feet of the Lord to his heart." End quote. Text 22. Hearing all these statements, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mind was certainly softened, but externally he wished to speak some harsh words. Text 23. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, quote, "I can understand that you all desire to take me to Kataka to see the king." End quote. Purport. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is naturally the reservoir of all kindness, and as soon as he heard the statements made by the king, his heart immediately softened. Thus, the Lord was ready to go see the king, even at Katak. He did not even consider allowing the king to come from Katak to Jagannath Puri to see him. It is significant that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so kind that he was ready to go see the king of Katak at Katak. Apparently, it was never expected that the king wanted to see the Lord at his place, but by the way of being externally harsh, the Lord indicated that if all the devotees so desired, he would go to Katak to see the king. Text 24. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, quote, "What to speak of spiritual advancement? All the people will blaspheme me, and what to speak of all the people? Damodar would chastise me." Text 25. Quote, "I shall not meet the king at the request of all the devotees, but I shall do so if Damodar will give me his permission." End quote. Purport. From the spiritual point of view, a sannyasi is strictly forbidden to see materialistic people, especially a king who is always engaged in counting pounds, shilling, and pence. Indeed, the meeting between a sannyasi and a king is always considered abominable. A sannyasi is always subjected to public criticism, and a small fault on his part is taken seriously by the public. People actually expect a sannyasi to preach and not take part in any social or political matters. If a sannyasi is subject to public criticism, his preaching will not be fruitful. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically wanted to avoid such criticism so that his preaching work would not be hampered. So it so happened that while the Lord was talking to his disciples at that time, the devotee Damodar Pandit was present. This Damodar Pandit was a very faithful devotee and a staunch lover of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Whenever there was anything that might touch or taint the character of the Lord, Damodar Prabhu would immediately point it out, not even considering the exalted position of the Lord. It is sometimes said that fools rush in where angels dare not, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to point out Damodar Pandit's foolishness in coming forward to criticize the Lord. Thus the Lord herein indicated indirectly that if Damodar Pandit would give him permission, he would go to see the king. There was a deep meaning in this statement, for it is a warning that Damodar should dare not criticize the Lord any more, for it was not befitting his position as a devotee. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was considered the guide and spiritual master of all the devotees living with him. Damodar Pandit was one of them, and the Lord reminded Damodar Pandit rendered Damodar Pandit a special favor by warning him to avoid criticizing him any further. A devotee or a disciple should never attempt to criticize the Lord or his representative, the spiritual master. Text 26. Damodar immediately replied, quote, "My Lord, you are the fully independent Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since everything is known to you, you know what is permissible and what is not permissible." Text 27. Quote, "I am merely an insignificant jiva, so what power do I have to give direction to you? It is by your personal choice you will meet with the king. I shall see it." Text 28. Quote, "The king is very much attached to you, and you are feeling affection and love toward him. Thus I can understand that by virtue of the king's affection for you, you will touch him." Text 29. Quote, "Although you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead and are completely independent, you are still dependent on the love and affection of your devotees. That is your nature." End quote. Text 30. Nityananda Prabhu then said, quote, "Who is there in the three worlds who can ask you to see the king?" Text 31. "Still, isn't it the nature of an attached man to give up his life if he does not attain his desired object?" Text 32. Quote, "For instance, some of the wives of the Brahmanas who were performing sacrifices gave up their lives in the presence of their husbands for the sake of Krishna." End quote. Purport. This refers to the day Lord Shri Krishna and his cowherd boyfriends and flocks of animals were present on the pasturing grounds near Mathura. At that time, the cowherd boys, being a little hungry, requested food, and Lord Krishna asked them to go to the Brahmanas who were engaged nearby in performing jaga, or sacrifice, and to get some food from that jaga. Being so ordered by the Lord, all the cowherd boys went to the Brahmanas and asked them for food, but they were denied. After this, the cowherd boys begged food from the wives of the Brahmanas. All these wives were very much devoted to Lord Krishna in spontaneous love, and as soon as they heard the request of the cowherd boys and understood that Krishna wanted some food, they immediately left the place of sacrifice. They were very much chastised for this by their husbands, and they were ready to give up their lives. It is the nature of a pure devotee to sacrifice his life for the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Text 33. Nityananda Prabhu then submitted one suggestion for the Lord's consideration. Quote, "There is a way," end quote, he suggested, quote, "by which you need not meet the king, but which would enable the king to continue living." Text 34. Quote, "If you, out of your mercy, send one of your outward garments to the king would live hoping to see you sometime in the future." End quote. Purport. Sri Nityananda Prabhu was thus very tactfully suggesting that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu give a piece of his old clothing to the king. Even though the king was not fit to meet the Lord, the king would then be pacified by receiving such cloth. The king was very much anxious to see the Lord, and that yet it was not possible for the Lord to see him. Just to resolve the situation, Nityananda Prabhu suggested that the Lord send an old piece of clothing. Thus the king would understand that the Lord was showing mercy to him. The king would then not do anything drastic like giving up his life or becoming a mendicant. Text 35. The Lord said, quote, "Since you are all very learned personalities, whatever you decide, I shall accept," end quote. Text 36. Lord Nityananda Prabhu then obtained an external garment used by the Lord by requesting it from Govinda. Text 37. Thus, Nityananda Prabhu delivered the old cloth to the care of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya sent it to the king. Text 38. When the king received the old cloth, he began to worship it exactly as he would worship the Lord personally. Purport. This is also the conclusion of the Vedic injunction. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the absolute truth, everything in relation to him is also on the same platform. The king had great affection for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and although he could not see the Lord, he had nonetheless already attained the conclusion of devotional service. Immediately upon receiving the cloth from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, the king began to worship it, accepting it as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Lord's clothing, bedding, slippers, and everything required as an ordinary necessity are all transformations of Shesha, Vishnu, the expansion of Sri Baladev. Thus, the cloth and other paraphernalia of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are but other forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything connected to the Lord is worshipable. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructs us that just as Krishna is worshipable, Krishna's place, Vrindavan, is also worshipable, and as Vrindavan is worshipable, similarly the paraphernalia in Vrindavan, the trees, roads, river, everything, is worshipable. A pure devotee thus sings, Jaya Jaya Vrindavana Vas Shri Yato Jan. Quote, "All glories to the residents of Vrindavan," end quote. If a devotee has a staunch devotional attitude, all these conclusions will be awakened or revealed within the heart. Yase deve parabhaktir yata teve tatagaro tas hyaita ke hita hyarta prakashanti mahatmana. Quote, "Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed," end quote. Shvetashvatara Upanishad 623. Thus, following in the footsteps of Maharaj Prataparudra and other devotees, we should learn to worship everything belonging to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is referred to by Lord Shiva as Tadyanam. In the Padma Purana it is said, Aradhananam Sharvesham Vishnur Aradhanam Param Tasmat Paratanam Devi Tadyanam Samacharam. Quote, "O Devi, the most exalted system of worship is the worship of Lord Vishnu. Greater than that is the worship of Tadiya, or anything belonging to Vishnu," end quote. Sri Vishnu is Sat Chid Ananda Vigraha. Similarly, the most confidential servant of Krishna, the spiritual master, and all the devotees of Vishnu are Tadiya. The Satchit Ananda Vigraha, Guru, Vaishnavas, and things used by them must be considered Tadiya and without a doubt worshipable by all living beings. Text 39. After returning from his service in South India, Ramananda Roy requested the king to allow him to remain with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 40. When Ramananda Roy requested the king to allow him to stay with the Lord, the king immediately gave him permission with great satisfaction. As for the king himself, he began to solicit Ramananda Roy to make a meeting arrangement. Text 41. The king told Ramananda Roy, quote, "Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is very, very merciful to you. Therefore, please solicit my meeting with him without fail," end quote. Text 42. The king and Ramananda Roy returned together to Jagannath Kshetra, Puri, and Sri Ramananda Roy met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 43. At that time, Ramananda Roy informed Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu about the ecstatic love of the king. Indeed, as soon as there was some opportunity, he repeatedly informed the Lord about the king. Text 44. Sri Ramananda Roy was indeed a diplomatic minister for the king. His general behavior was very expert, and simply by describing the king's love for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he gradually softened the Lord's mind. Purport. A diplomat in the material world knows how to deal with people, especially in political affairs. Some of the great devotees of the Lord, like Ramananda Roy, Raghunath Das Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, and Rupa Goswami, were government officers and had a background of very opulent householder life. Consequently, they knew how to deal with people. In many instances, we have seen the diplomacy of Rupa Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, and Ramananda Roy employed in the service of the Lord. When Raghunath Das Goswami's father and uncle were to be arrested by the government officials, Raghunath Das Goswami hid them and personally met with government officials and settled the affair diplomatically. This is but one instance. Similarly, Sanatan Goswami, after resigning his ministership, was thrown in jail, and he bribed the attendant of the jail so that he could leave the clutches of the Nawab and live with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now we see Ramananda Roy, a most confidential devotee of the Lord, diplomatically soften the heart of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu despite the fact that the Lord definitely decided not to meet the king. The diplomacy of Ramananda Roy and entities of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and all the other great devotees succeeded. The conclusion of that is that diplomacy used for the service of the Lord is a form of devotional service. Text 45. Maharaj Prataparudra, in great anxiety, could not endure not seeing the Lord. Therefore Sri Ramananda Roy, by his diplomacy, arranged a meeting with the Lord for the king. Text 46. Sri Ramananda Roy frankly requested Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, quote, "Please show your lotus feet to the king at least once." End quote. Text 47. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied, quote, "My dear Ramananda, why you should make this request after duly considering whether it is befitting for a sannyasi to meet a king." Text 48. If a mendicant meets a king, this world and the next world are both destroyed for the mendicant. Indeed, what is there to say of the next world? In this world, people will joke if a sannyasi meets a king. End quote. Text 49. Ramananda Roy replied, quote, "My lord, you are the supreme independent personality. You have nothing to fear from anyone because you are not dependent on anyone." End quote. Text 50. When Ramananda Roy addressed Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu objected, saying, quote, "I am not the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but an ordinary human being. Therefore, I must fear public opinion in three ways, with my body, mind, and words." Text 51. Quote, "As soon as the general public finds a little fault in the behavior of a sannyasi, they advertise it like wildfire. A black spot of ink cannot be hidden on a white cloth. It is always very prominent." End quote. Text 52. Ramananda Roy replied, quote, "My dear Lord, you have delivered so many sinful people. This King Prataparudra, the king of Orissa, is actually a servitor of the Lord and your devotee." End quote. Text 53. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then said, quote, "There may be much milk in a big pot, but if it is contaminated by a drop of liquor, it is untouchable." Text 54. The king certainly possesses all good qualities, but simply by taking up the name, quote, king, end quote, he has infected everything. Text 55. But if you are still eager for the king to meet me, please first bring his son to meet me. Text 58:6. Quote, "It is indicated in the revealed scriptures that as the son it represents the father, therefore the son's meeting with me would be just as good as the king's meeting with me." End quote. Purport. In Srimad Bhagavatam 10.78.36 it is said, "Atma vai putra appana iti vedu shashanam." The Vedas enjoin that one is born as his own son. The son is not different from the father, for this is admitted in every revealed scripture. In Christian theology, it is believed that Christ, the Son of God, is also God. Both of them are identical. Text 57. Ramananda Roy then went to inform the king about his talks with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and following the Lord's order, brought the king's son to see him. Text 58. The prince, just entering upon his youth, was very beautiful. He was blackish in complexion, had large lotus eyes. Text 59. The prince was dressed in yellow cloth, and there were jeweled ornaments decorating his body. Therefore, anyone who saw him would remember Lord Krishna. Text 60. Seeing the boy, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately remembered Krishna. Meeting the boy in ecstatic love, the Lord began to speak. Text 61. Quote, "Here is a great devotee," end quote, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said. Quote, "Upon seeing him, everyone can remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, son of Maharaj Nanda," end quote. Purport. In his Anubhasya, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur states that a materialist mistakenly accepts the body and mind as the source of material enjoyment. In other words, a materialist accepts the bodily conception of life. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not regard the son of Maharaj Prabhupada with the idea that he was a materialist, being the son of a materialist, nor did he consider himself the enjoyer. Mayavadi philosophers make a great mistake by assuming that the Satchidananda Vigraha, the transcendental form of the Lord, is like a material body. However, there is no material contamination in transcendence, nor is there any possibility of imagining a spirituality in matter. One cannot accept matter as spirit, as indicated by the technical words Bhoma Jyadi, Srimad Bhagavatam 10.84.13. Materialistic Mayavadis imagine the form of God in matter, although according to their imagination, God is unlimitedly formless. This is simply mental speculation. Even though Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he placed himself in the position of a gopi. He also accepted the king's son directly as the son of Maharaj Nanda, Rajendra Nandana Hari. This is perfect vision according to the direction of the Vedic culture, as confirmed in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Pandita Samadarshana. Such acceptance of the absolute truth, according to Vaishnava philosophy, is explained in both the Mundaka Upanishads 3.2.3 and the Katha Upanishad 1.2.23 in the following words. Nayam Atma Pravachanena Labhyo Na Medhaya Na Bahuna Shutena Yam Evaisha Vrinute Tena Labhyas Tasyaisha Atma Vivnute Tanum Shvam. Quote, "The Supreme Lord is not obtained by expert explanations, by vast intelligence, nor even by much hearing. He is obtained only by one whom he himself chooses. To such a person he manifests his own form." End quote. The living entity is entangled in material existence due to his lack of such a spiritual vision. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has sung in his Kalyana Kalpataru, Samshare Aisya Prakriti Bhajya Purusha Abhimani Mare. When the living entity comes to the material world, he thinks himself the enjoyer. Thus he becomes more and more entangled. Text 62. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, quote, "I have become very much obligated just by seeing this boy," end quote. After saying this, the Lord again embraced the prince. Text 63. As soon as the prince was touched by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, symptoms of ecstatic love immediately manifest themselves in his body. These symptoms included perspiration, trembling, tears, being stunned, and jubilation. Text 64. The boy began to cry and dance, and he chanted, quote, "Krishna, Krishna," end quote. Upon seeing his bodily symptoms and his chanting and dancing, all the devotees praised him for his great spiritual fortune. Text 65. At that time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu calmed the youth and ordered him to come there daily to meet him. Text 66. They then departed from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Ramananda Roy took the boy back to the king's palace. The king was very happy when he heard of his son's activities. Text 67. Just by embracing his son, the king was filled with ecstatic love, just as if he had touched Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu directly. Text 68. Since then, the fortunate prince was one of the most intimate devotees of the Lord. Purport. In this regard, Srila Prabhupada Saraswati wrote, Yat Karunya Kataksha Vibhava Vatam. If Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu simply glanced at someone for a moment, that person immediately turned into one of the most confidential devotees of the Lord. The prince came to see the Lord for the first time, but by the Lord's mercy the boy immediately became a topmost devotee. This was not in theory, but in practice. We cannot apply the Nagna Matrika Naya formula. This states that if one's mother is naked in her childhood, she should continue to remain naked even though she has become the mother of so many children. If a person is actually benedicted by the mercy of the Lord, he can immediately become a topmost devotee of the Lord. The logic of Nagna Matrika states that if a person is not elevated to on such and such a date, he cannot become an exalted devotee overnight, as it were. This particular incident offers evidence to contradict that theory. On the previous day, the boy was simply an ordinary prince, and the next day he was counted as one of the topmost devotees of the Lord. This was all made possible by the causeless mercy of the Lord. The Lord is omnipotent, all-powerful, and almighty, and he can act as he likes. Text 69. Thus, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu acts in the society of his pure devotees, performing his pastimes and spreading the Sankirtan movement. Text 70. Some of the prominent devotees like Advaitacharya used to invite Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to take his meals at their homes. The Lord accepted such invitations accompanied by his devotees. Text 71. In this way, the Lord passed some days in great jubilation. Then the car festival of Lord Jagannath approached. Text 72. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu first called for Kashi Mishra, and then for the superintendent of the temple, then for Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Text 73. When these three people came before the Lord, he begged them to wash the temple known as Gundicha. Purport. This Gundicha temple is situated 2 miles northeast of the Jagannath temple. At the time of the Rath Yatra festival, Lord Jagannath goes to the Gundicha temple from his original temple and stays there for 1 week. After 1 week, he returns to his original temple. It is understood by hearsay that the wife of Indradumna, the king who established the Jagannath temple, was known as Gundicha. There is also mention of the name of the Gundicha temple in authoritative scripture. The area of the Gundicha temple is estimated to be 288 cubits by 215 cubits. The main temple inside is about 36 cubits by 30 cubits, and the meeting hall is 32 cubits by 30 cubits. Text 74. Upon hearing the Lord's request for them to wash the Gundicha temple, the Padicha, the superintendent of the temple, said, quote, "My dear sir, we are all your servants. Whatever you desire is our duty to perform." Text 75. The king gave a special order for me to do without delay whatever your lordship orders. Text 76. My dear Lord, washing the temple is not service befitting you. Nonetheless, if you wish to do so, it will be accepted as one of your pastimes. Text 77. Quote, to wash the temple, you need many water pots and brooms. Therefore, order me. I can immediately bring all these to you. End quote. Text 78. As soon as the superintendent understood the desire of the Lord, he immediately delivered 100 new water pots and 100 brooms for sweeping the temple. Text 79. The next day, early in the morning, the Lord took his personal associates with him, and with his own hand smeared sandalwood pulp on their bodies. Text 80. He then gave each devotee a broom with his own hand, and, taking all of them personally with him, the Lord went to Gundicha. Text 81. In this way, the Lord and his associates went to cleanse the Gundicha temple. At first, they cleansed the temple with the brooms. Text 82. The Lord cleansed everything inside the temple very nicely, including the ceiling. He then took up the sitting place, Shingasan, cleansed it, and again put it in its original place. Text 83. Thus the Lord and his companions cleansed and swept all the temple's buildings, big and small, and finally cleansed the area between the temple and the meeting place. Text 84. Indeed, hundreds of devotees were engaged in cleansing all around the temple, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was personally carrying out the operation just to instruct others. Text 85. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu washed and cleansed the temple in great jubilation, chanting the holy name of Lord Krishna all the time. Similarly, all the devotees were also chanting and at the same time performing their respective duties. Text 86. The entire beautiful body of the Lord was covered with dust and dirt. In this way, it became transcendently beautiful. At times, when cleansing the temple, the Lord shed tears, and in some places he even cleansed with those tears. Text 87. After this, the place where the Lord deity's food was kept, Bhoga Mandir, was cleansed. Then the yard was cleansed, and then all the residential quarters, one after another. Text 88. After Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu collected all the straw, dust, and grains of sand in one place, he gathered it all in his cloth and threw it outside. Text 89. Following the example of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all the devotees in great jubilation began to gather straws and dust in their own cloths and throw them outside the temple. Text 90. The Lord then told the devotees, quote, I can tell how much you have labored and how well you have cleansed the temple simply by seeing all the straw and dust you have collected outside. End quote. Text 91. Even though all the devotees collected dirt in one pile, the dirt collected by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was much greater. Text 92. After the inside of the temple was cleansed, the Lord again allotted areas for the devotees to cleanse. Text 93. The Lord then ordered everyone to cleanse the inside of the temple very perfectly by taking finer dust grains and straw of sand, grains of sand and straws and throwing them outside. Text 94. After Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all the Vaishnavas cleansed the temple for a second time, the Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very happy to see the cleansing work. Text 95. While the temple was being swept, about 100 men stood ready with filled water pots, and they simply awaited the Lord's order to throw them. Text 96. As soon as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu called for water, all the men immediately brought the 100 water pots, which were completely filled, and delivered them before the Lord. Text 97. In this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu first washed the main temple and then thoroughly washed the ceiling, the walls, the floor, the sitting place, Singhasan, and everything else within the room. Text 98. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself and his devotees began to throw water onto the ceiling. When this water fell, it washed the walls and floor. Text 99. Then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began to wash the sitting place of Lord Jagannath with his own hands, and all the devotees began to bring water to the Lord. Text 100. All the devotees within the temple began to wash. Each had a broom in his hand. In this way they cleansed the temple of the Lord. Text 101. Someone brought water to pour into the hands of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and someone poured water on his lotus feet. Text 102. The water that fell from the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was drunk by someone who hid himself. Someone else begged for that water, and another person was giving that water in charity. Text 103. After the room was washed, the water was let through an outlet and then flowed and filled the yard outside. Text 104. The Lord mopped the rooms with his own cloths, and he polished the throne with them also. Text 105. In this way, all the rooms were cleansed with 100 water pots. After the rooms had been cleansed, the minds of the devotees were as clean as the rooms. Text 106. When the temple was cleansed, it was purifying, cool, and pleasing, just as if the Lord's own pure mind had appeared. Text 107. Since hundreds of men were engaged in bringing water from the lake, there was no place to stand on the banks. Consequently, someone began to draw the water from a well. Text 108. Hundreds of devotees were brought water from in the pots, and hundreds took the empty pots away to fill them again. Text 109. With the exception of Nityananda Prabhu, Advaitacharya, Swarup Damodar, Bhavananda Bharati, and Paramananda Puri, everyone was engaged in filling the water pots and bringing them there. Text 110. Many of the water pots were broken when the people collided with one another, and hundreds of men had to bring new water pots to fill. Text 111. Some people were filling the pots, others were washing the rooms, but everyone was engaged in chanting the holy name of Krishna and Hari. Text 112. One person begged for a water pot by chanting the holy names of Krishna, and another delivered the pot while chanting Krishna, Krishna. Text 113. Whenever anyone had to speak, he did so by uttering the holy name of Krishna. Consequently, the holy name of Krishna became an indication for everything, for everyone who wanted something. Text 114. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was vibrating the holy name of Krishna in ecstatic love, he himself was performing the work of hundreds of men. Text 115. It appeared as though Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was cleansing and washing with 100 hands. He approached everyone just to teach them how to work. Text 116. When he saw someone doing nicely, the Lord praised him, but if he saw that someone was not working to his satisfaction, he immediately chastised that person, not bearing him any grudge. Text 117. The Lord would say, quote, "You have done well. Teach this to others so that they may act in the same way." End quote. Text 118. As soon as they heard Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu say this, everyone became ashamed. Thus they began to work with great attention. Text 119. They washed the Jagamohan area and then the place where food was kept. All other places were also washed. Text 120. In this way, the meeting place was washed, the entire yard, the raised sitting places, the kitchen, and every other room. Text 121. Thus all places around the temple were thoroughly washed within and without. Text 122. After everything was thoroughly washed, a Vaishnava from Bengal, who was very intelligent and simple, came and poured water on the lotus feet of the Lord. Text 123. The Gaudiya Vaishnava then took that water and drank it himself. Seeing that, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu felt a little unhappy and was also outwardly angry. Text 124. Although the Lord was certainly satisfied with him, he became angry externally in order to establish the etiquette of religious principles. Text 125. The Lord then called for Swarup Damodar and told him, quote, "Just see the behavior of your Bengali Vaishnava." Text 126. This person from Bengal has washed my feet within the temple of the personality of Godhead. Not only that, but he has drunk the water himself. Text 127. I now do not know what my destination is because of this offense. Indeed, your Bengali Vaishnav has greatly implicated me. End quote. Purport. It is significant that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Swarup Damodar Goswami that the Bengali Vaishnava was, quote, your Gaudiya Vaishnava, end quote. This means that all Gaudiya Vaishnavas who are followers of the Chaitanya cult are subordinate to Swarup Damodar Goswami. The Parampara system is very strictly observed by Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's personal secretary was Swarup Damodar Goswami. The next group of devotees was the 6 Goswamis, then Kaviraj Goswami. It is necessary to observe the Parampara system of the Chaitanya cult. There are many offenses one can commit while serving the Lord, and these are described in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Hari Bhakti Vilas and other books. According to rules and regulations, one should not accept obeisances in the temple or of the Lord before the deity, nor is it proper for a devotee to offer obeisances and touch the feet of the spiritual master before the deity. This is considered an offense. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself was personally the personality of Godhead, and therefore it was actually not offensive to wash his lotus feet in the temple. However, because he was playing the part of an acharya, the Lord considered himself an ordinary human being. He also wanted to give instruction to ordinary human beings. The point is that even though one plays the part of a spiritual master, he should not accept obeisances or permit a disciple to wash his feet before the deity. This is a matter of etiquette. Text 128. At this point, Swarup Damodar Goswami caught the Gaudiya Vaishnava by the neck and, giving him a little push, ejected him from the Gundichapuri temple and made him stay outside. Text 129. After Swarup Damodar Goswami returned within the temple, he requested Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to excuse that innocent person. Text 130. After this incident, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very satisfied. He then asked all the devotees to sit down in 2 lines on both sides. Text 131. The Lord then personally sat down in the middle and picked up all kinds of straw, grains, and sand and dirty things. Text 132. While Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was picking up the straws and grains of sand, he said, quote, I shall gather everyone's collections, and I shall ask whoever has collected less than all the others to pay a fine of sweet cakes and sweet rice, end quote. Text 133. In this way, all the quarters of the Gundicha temple were completely cleansed and cleared. All quarters were cool and spotless, like one's cleansed and pacified mind. Text 134. When the water from the different rooms was finally let out through the halls, it appears as if new rivers were rushing out to meet the waters of the ocean. Text 135. Outside the gateway of the temple, all the roads were also cleansed, and no one could tell exactly how this was done. Purport. In commenting on the cleansing of the Gundicha temple, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was personally giving instructions on how one should receive Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, within one's cleansed and pacified heart. If one wants to see Krishna seated in his heart, he must first cleanse the heart as prescribed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Shikshastika, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. In this age, everyone's heart is unclean, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Hridyas Antasto Hyabhadarni. To wash all dirty things accumulated within the heart, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu advised everyone to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. The final result will be that the heart is cleansed, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Similarly, Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.17 also confirms this statement, Shinvanta Sarkata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtana Hridyantasto Hyabhadarni Vidunoti Saritsatam. Quote, Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, supersoul, in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire from material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who relishes his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. End quote. If the devotee at all wants to cleanse his heart, he must chant and hear the glories of the Lord Shri Krishna, Srinvata Sarkata Krishna. This is a simple process. Krishna himself will help cleanse the heart because he is already seated there. Krishna wants to continue living within the heart, and the Lord wants to give directions, but one has to keep his heart as clean as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu kept the Gundicha temple. The devotee therefore has to cleanse his heart just as the Lord cleansed the Gundicha temple. In this way, one can be pacified and enriched by devotional service. If the heart is filled with straw, grains of sand, weeds, or dust, in other words, abhilashita punya, Purna, one cannot enthrone the Supreme Personality of Godhead there. The heart must be cleansed of all material motives brought about through fruitive work, speculative knowledge, the mystic yoga system, and so many other forms of so-called meditation. The heart must be cleansed within and without ulterior motive. As Srila Rupa Goswami says, Anya bilashita sunya jnana karma nanavartam. In other words, there should not be any external motive. One should not attempt material upliftment, understanding the supreme by speculative knowledge, fruitive activities, severe austerity, and penance, and so on. All these activities are against the natural growth and of spontaneous love of Godhead. As soon as these are present within the heart should be understood to be unclean and therefore unfit to serve as Krishna's sitting place. We cannot perceive the Lord's presence in our heart unless our hearts are cleansed. A material desire is explained as a desire to enjoy the material world to its fullest extent. In modern language, this is called economic development. An inordinate desire for economic development is considered to be like straws and grains of sand within the heart. If one is overly engaged in material activity, the heart will remain disturbed. As stated by Narottam Das Thakur, Samsare Vishanale Diva Nasi Hiajwale Judaite Na Kainu Upaya. In other words, endeavor for material opulence is against the principle of devotional service. Material enjoyment includes activities such as great sacrifices for auspicious activity, charity, austerity, elevation to the higher planetary system, and even living happily within the material world. Modernized material benefits are like the dust of material contamination. When this dust is agitated by the whirlwind of fruitive activity, it becomes the heart. Thus, the mirror of the heart is covered with dust. There are many desires to perform auspicious and inauspicious activities, but people do not know how life after life they are keeping their hearts unclean. One who cannot give up the desire for fruitive activity is considered to be covered by the dust of material contamination. Karmis generally think that the interaction of fruitive activities can be counteracted by another karma or fruitive activity. This is certainly a mistaken conception. If one is deluded by such a conception, he is cheated by his own activity. Such activities have been compared to an elephant's bathing. An elephant may bathe very thoroughly, but as soon as it comes out of the river, it immediately takes some sand from the land and throws it all over his body. If one suffers due to his past fruitive activities, he cannot counteract his suffering by performing auspicious activities. The sufferings of human society cannot be counteracted by material plans. The only way suffering can be mitigated is by Krishna consciousness. When one takes to Krishna consciousness and engages himself in the devotional service of the Lord, beginning with chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord, the cleansing of the heart begins. Impersonal speculation, monism, merging into the existence of the Supreme, speculative knowledge, mystical yoga, and meditation are all compared to grains of sand. They simply cause irritation to the heart. No one can satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead by such activities, nor do we give the Lord a chance to sit in our hearts peacefully. Rather, the Lord is simply disturbed by them. Sometimes the yogis and gyanis in the beginning take to the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra as a way to begin their various practices. However, when they falsely think that they have attained release from the bondage of material existence, they give up chanting. They do not consider that the ultimate goal is the form of the Lord or the name of the Lord. Such unfortunate creatures are never favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for they do not know what devotional service is. They are described in Bhagavad Gita in this way: Tanaham dvishata kuran sameshu naradanman kshipami Ajashram Ashubam Ashuravesh Yonishu. Quote, those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men, are cast by me into the ocean of material existence, into various demonic species of life. End quote. Bhagavad Gita 16:19. The demons are always envious of the Lord and are therefore most mischievous. By his practical example, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has shown us that all the grains of sand must be picked up thoroughly and thrown outside. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also cleansed the outside of the temple, fearing that the grains of sand would again come within. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains that even though one may become free from the desire for fruitive activity, sometimes the subtle desires for fruitive activity comes into being within the heart. So if one often thinks of conducting business or to improve devotional activity, however, the contamination is so strong that it may later develop into misunderstanding, as described as kutinata, fault-finding, and pratishtaha, the desire for name and fame and for high position, jiva himsa, envy of other living entities, nishidachara, accepting things forbidden in the Shastra, kama, desire for material gain, and puja, hankering for popularity. The word kutinati means duplicity. As an example, one may attempt to imitate Srila Haridas Thakur by living in a solitary place. One's real desire may be for name and fame. In other words, if one thinks that fools will accept one to be as good as Haridas Thakur just because one lives in a solitary place. These are all material desires. A neophyte devotee is certainly to be attacked by other material desires as well, women and money. In this way, the heart is again filled with dirty things and becomes harder and harder, like that of a materialist. Gradually, one desires to become a reputed devotee or an avatar incarnation. The word jiva himsa, envy of other living entities, actually means stopping the preaching of Krishna consciousness. Preaching work is described as paropakar, welfare activities for others. Those who are ignorant of the benefits of devotional service must be educated by preaching. If one stops preaching, simply sits down in a solitary place, he is engaged in material activity. If one desires to make a compromise with the Mayavadis, he is also engaged in material activities. A devotee should never make compromises with non-devotees. By acting as professional guru, mystic yogi, or miracle man, one may cheat and bluff the general public and gain fame as a wonderful mystic, but all this is considered to be dust, straw, and grains of sand within the heart. In addition, one should follow the very good principles and not desire illicit sex, gambling, intoxicants, and meat. To give us practical instructions, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu cleansed the temple twice. His second cleansing was more thorough. His idea was to throw away all the stumbling blocks on the path of devotional service. He cleansed the temple with firm conviction, as is evident from his using his own personal garments for cleansing. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to see personally that the temple was thoroughly cleansed, as clean as marble. Clean marble gives a cooling effect. Devotional service means attaining peace from all disturbances caused by material contamination. In other words, it is the process by which the mind is cooled. The mind can be peaceful and thoroughly cleansed when one no longer desires anything but devotional service. Even though all dirty things may be cleansed away, sometimes subtle desires remain in the mind for impersonalism, monism, success, and the four principles of religious activity, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. These are like spots on a clean cloth. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also wanted to cleanse all these away. By his practical activity, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu informed us how to cleanse our hearts. Once the heart is cleansed, we should invite Lord Sri Krishna to sit down, and we should observe the festival by distributing prasad and chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to teach every devotee by his personal behavior. If one spreads the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, accepts a similar responsibility. The Lord was personally chastising and praising individuals in the course of the cleansing, and those who are engaged as acharyas must learn from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu how to train the devotees by personal example. The Lord was very pleased with those who could cleanse the temple by taking out undesirable things accumulated within. This is called anartha nivritti, cleansing the heart of all unwanted things. Thus, the cleansing of the Gundicha Mandir was conducted by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to let us know how the heart should be cleansed and soothed to receive Lord Sri Krishna and enable him to sit within the heart without disturbance. Text 136. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also cleansed the Nishinga temple inside and outside. Finally, he rested a few minutes and then began dancing. Purport. The Nrsinga temple is a nice temple, just outside the Gundicha temple. In this temple, there is a great festival on the day of Nrsinga Chaturdasi. There is also a Nrsinga temple at Navadvip where the same festival is observed, as described by Murari Gupta in his book Chaitanya Charita. Text 137. All around Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all the devotees perform congregational chanting. The Lord, just like a maddened lion, danced in the middle. Text 138. As usual, when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu danced, there were perspiration, trembling, fading, tears, jubilation, and roaring. Indeed, the tears from his eyes washed his body and those before him. Text 139. In this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu washed the bodies of all the devotees with the tears from his eyes. The tears poured like rains in the month of Shravana. Text 140. The sky was filled with a great and loud chanting of Sankirtan, and the earth shook from the jumping and dancing of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 141. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu always liked the loud chanting of Swarup Damodar. Therefore, when Swarup Damodar sang, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu danced and jumped high in jubilation. Text 142. The Lord thus chanted and danced for some time. Finally, understanding the circumstances, he stopped. Text 143. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then ordered Shri Gopal, the son of Advaitacharya, to dance. Text 144. While dancing in ecstatic love, Shri Gopal fainted and fell to the ground unconscious. Text 145. When Shri Gopal fainted, Advaitacharya hastily took him upon his lap. Seeing that he was not breathing, he became very agitated. Text 146. Advaitacharya and others began to chant the holy name of Lord Nrsinga and sprinkle water. The roaring of that chant was so great that it seemed to shake the entire universe. Text 147. When the boy did not regain consciousness after some time, Advaitacharya and the other devotees began to cry. Text 148. Then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu placed his hand on the chest of Shri Gopal and said loudly, quote, "Gopal, stand up," end quote. Text 149. As soon as Gopal heard the voice of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he immediately came to his senses. All the devotees then began to dance, chanting the holy name of Hari. Text 150. This incident has been described in detail by Vrindavan Das Thakur, therefore I've described it only in brief. Purport. This is a matter of etiquette. If a previous acharya has already written about something, there is no need to repeat it for personal sense gratification or to outdo the previous acharya. Unless there is some definite improvement, one should not repeat. Text 151. After taking rest, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all the devotees departed to take their baths. Text 152. After bathing, the Lord stood on the bank of the lake and put on dry garments. After offering obeisances to Lord Nrsingadev, whose temple was nearby, the Lord entered a garden. Text 153. In the garden, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sat down with the other devotees. Vaninath Roy then came and brought all kinds of Mahaprasad. Text 154 and 155. Both Kashi Mishra and Tulsi, the superintendent of the temple, brought as much prasad as 500 men could eat. Seeing the large quantity of prasad, which consisted of rice, cakes, sweet rice, and a variety of vegetables, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very satisfied. Text 156. Among the devotees present with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were Paramananda Puri, Brahmananda Bharati, Advaitacharya, and Nityananda Prabhu. Text 157. Acharya Ratna, Acharya Nidhi, Srivas Thakur, Gadadhar Pandit, Shankar, Nandanacharya, Raghava Pandit, and Vikreshwar were also present. Text 158. Receiving the permission of the Lord, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya sat down. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all his devotees sat on raised wooden seats. Text 159. In this way, all the devotees sat down to take their lunch in consecutive lines, one beside the other. Text 160. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was repeatedly calling, Haridas, Haridas, and at that time Haridas, standing at a distance, spoke as follows. Text 161. Haridas said, quote, "Let Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu take his lunch with the devotees. Since I am abominable, I cannot sit down among you." Text 162. Quote, "Govinda will give me prasad later, outside the door," end quote. Understanding his mind, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not call him again. Text 163 and 4. Shrup Damodar Goswami, Jagadananda, Damodar Pandit, Kashishwar, Gopinath, Vaninath, and Shakara distributed prasad, and the devotees chanted the holy names at intervals. Text 165. Lord Sri Krishna had previously taken his lunch in the forest, and that very pastime was remembered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 166. Just from remembering the pastimes of Lord Sri Krishna, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was agitated by ecstatic love. However, considering the time and circumstance, he remained somewhat patient. Text 167. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, quote, "You can give me the ordinary vegetable known as lapra vyanjana, and you may deliver to all the devotees better preparations like cake, sweet rice, and amrita gutika." End quote. Purport. The lapra vyanjana is a combination of several green vegetables all mixed together. It is often mixed with rice and delivered to poor men. Amrita gutika is a preparation of thick puri mixed with condensed milk. It is also known as Amrita Rasavali. Text 168. Since Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is omniscient, he knew what type of preparation each person liked. He therefore had Shrup Damodar deliver these preparations to their full satisfaction. Text 169. Jagadananda went to distribute prasad, and suddenly he placed all the first-class preparations on the plate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 170. When such nice prasad was put on the plate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord was outwardly very angry. Nonetheless, when the preparations were placed on his plate, sometimes by tricks and sometimes by force, the Lord was satisfied. Text 171. When the food was thus delivered, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu looked at it for some time. Being afraid of Jagadananda, he finally ate something. Text 172. The Lord knew that if he did not eat the food offered by Jagadananda, Jagadananda would certainly fast. Being afraid of this, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ate some of the prasad he offered. Text 173. Shrup Damodar Goswami then brought some excellent sweetmeats, and standing before the Lord, offered them to him. Text 174. Shrup Damodar Goswami then said, quote, "Just take a little of this Mahaprasad and see how it is that Lord Jagannath has accepted it." End quote. Text 175. Upon saying this, Shrup Damodar Goswami placed some food before the Lord, and the Lord, out of affection, ate it. Text 176. Shrup Damodar and Jagadananda again and again offered the Lord some food. Thus they behaved affectionately with the Lord. This was very, very uncommon. Text 177. The Lord made Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya sit on his left side, and when Sarvabhauma saw the behavior of Shrup Damodar and Jagadananda, he smiled. Text 178. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also wanted to offer Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya first-class food. Therefore, out of perfection, he had the servers put first-class food on his plate again and again. Text 179. Gopinath Acharya also brought first-class food and offered it to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya while speaking sweet words. Text 180. After serving Bhattacharya with first-class prasad, Gopinath Acharya said, quote, "Just imagine what Bhattacharya's previous mundane behavior must have been. Just consider how at present he is enjoying transcendental bliss." End quote. Purport. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was previously a smarta brahmana, that is, one who strictly follows the Vedic principles on the mundane platform. On the mundane platform, one cannot believe that prasad is transcendental, that Govinda is the original form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or that a Vaishnava is a liberated person. These transcendental considerations are out of the ordinary Vedic scholar's jurisdiction. Most scholars are called Vedantists. So-called followers of Vedanta philosophy consider the absolute truth to be impersonal. They also believe that a person born in a particular caste cannot change his caste until he dies and takes rebirth. The Smarta Brahmanas also reject the fact that Mahaprasad, food offered to the deity, is transcendental and materially uncontaminated. Originally, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was subjected to all the rules and regulations of the Vedic principles on the mundane platform. Now, Gopinath Acharya pointed out how Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had been converted by the causeless mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Being converted, Sarvabhauma partook of prasad with the Vaishnavas. Indeed, he sat by the side of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 181. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya replied, quote, I was simply a less intelligent logician. However, by your grace, I have received this opulence of perfection. Text 182. Quote, but for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, end quote, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya continued, quote, who is so merciful? He has converted a crow into a Garuda. Who could be so merciful? Text 183, quote, in the association of the jackals of logic, I simply continued to bark a resounding bew, bew. Now from the same mouth I am chanting the holy names Krishna and Hari. Text 184. Whereas I associated with the disciples of logic, all non-devotees, I am now merged in the waves of the nectarian ocean of the association of devotees. End quote. Purport. As Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains, the word Bahirmukha refers to a person who is very busy tasting material enjoyment. Such a person always poses himself as an enjoyer of the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Being attracted by external opulence, the non-devotee always forgets his intimate relationship with Krishna. Such a person does not like the idea of becoming Krishna conscious. This is explained by Srila Prahlad Maharaj in Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.30. Matir na Krishne paratasvatuva mito bepedyeta gretavatanam andantagobir vishitam tamishram punas charvita charvananam. Materialists who are overly attached or attracted to the material body, material world, and material enjoyment, who cannot control their material senses, are carried to the darkest regions of material existence. Such people cannot become Krishna conscious, neither by themselves nor by congregational effort. Such people do not understand the goal of life for a human being, which is to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. A human life is especially meant for this purpose, and one has to go through all kinds of penances and austerities and set aside the propensity for sense gratification. Materialists always remain blind because they are always guided by blind rascals. A materialistic person considers himself free to act as he likes. He does not know that he is rigidly controlled by the stringent laws of nature, nor does he know that he has to transmigrate from one body to another and perpetually rot in material existence. Such rascals and foolish people are lured by the prayers of their foolish leaders for sense gratification, and they cannot understand what is meant by Krishna consciousness. The material world exists outside the spiritual world, and a foolish materialist cannot estimate the extent of this material sky. What then can he know of the spiritual sky? Materialists simply believe their imperfect senses and do not take the instructions from the revealed scriptures. According to Vedic civilization, one has to see through the authority of revealed scriptures. Shastra Chakshu, one should see everything through the medium of the Vedic literature. In this way, one can distinguish between the spiritual world and material world. If one ignores such instructions, he cannot be convinced of the existence of the spiritual world. Because they have forgotten their spiritual identity, materialists take this material world as the all-in-all. They are therefore called Bahirmukha. Text 185. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied, quote, from your previous birth you have been in Krishna consciousness. Thus you love Krishna so much that simply by your association we are all developing Krishna consciousness. End quote. Text 186. Thus, there is no one living within these three worlds, save for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is always so willing to increase the glories of the devotees and give them satisfaction. Purport. In this regard, one should consult the discussion between Kapila Deva and Devahuti on the subject matter of devotional service. This is found in Srimad Bhagavatam 3rd Canto, text 187. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then took all the remnants of food offered to Jagannath, such as cakes and sweet rice, and distributed them all to the other devotees, calling them individually. Text 188. Sri Advaitacharya and Nityananda Prabhu sat side by side, and when prasad was being distributed, they both engaged in a type of mock fighting. Text 189. First, Advaitacharya said, quote, I am sitting in line with an unknown mendicant, and because I am eating with him, I do not know what kind of destination is awaiting me. Text 190. Quote, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is in the renounced order of life. Consequently, he does not recognize discrepancies. As a matter of fact, a sannyasi is not affected by eating food from anywhere and everywhere. Text 191. Quote, according to Shastras, there is no discrepancy in a sannyasi's eating at another's house. However, for a householder brahmana, this kind of eating is faulty. Text 192. Quote, it is not proper for householders to dine with those whose previous birth, family, character, and behavior are unknown, end quote. Text 193. Nityananda Prabhu immediately refuted Srila Advaitacharya, saying, quote, you are a teacher of impersonal monism, and the monistic conclusion is a great hindrance to progressive, pure devotional service. Text 194. Quote, one who participates in your impersonal monistic philosophy does not accept anything but the one Brahman, end quote. Purport. The impersonalist monists do not believe that God is the only object of worship and that the living entities are his eternal servants. According to the monists, God and the devotee may be separate in the material state, but when they are spiritually situated, there is no difference between them. This is called Advaita Siddhanta, the conclusion of the monists. Monists consider devotional service to be of the Lord to be material activity. Therefore, they consider such devotional activities to be the same as karma, fruit of activity. This monist mistake is a great stumbling block on the road to devotional service. Actually, this discussion between Advaitacharya and Nityananda was a mock fight to serve as a great instruction for all devotees. Sri Nityananda Prabhu wanted to point out that Advaitacharya, a pure devotee, did not agree with the monistic conclusion. The conclusion of devotional service is Vedanti tatatavdidas tattvam yajganamadvayam paramitmeti brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti sabdite. Quote, learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan, end quote. Srimad Bhagavatam 1-11. Absolute knowledge consists of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. This conclusion is not the same as that of the monists. Srila Advaitacharya was given the title Acharya because he spread the Bhakti cult, not the philosophy of monism. The true conclusion of Advaita Siddhanta is not the same as the philosophy of the monists. Here, Advaita Siddhanta means Advaya Gyan, or oneness in variety. Actually, Sri Nityananda Prabhu was praising Srila Advaitacharya through friendly mock fighting. He was giving the Vaishnava conclusion in terms of the Bhagavatam's conclusive words, Varanti tat tattva vidas. This is also the conclusion of a mantra in the Chandogya Upanishad, Ekam eva dvitiyam. A devotee knows that there is oneness in diversity. The mantras of the Shastras do not support the monistic conclusions of the impersonalists, nor does Vaishnava philosophy accept impersonalism without variety. Brahman is the greatest, he who includes everything, and that is oneness. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7:7, Mata Paratanam Nanyat. There is no one superior to Krishna himself. He is the original substance because every category emanates from him. Thus, he is simultaneously one with and different from all other categories. The Lord is always engaged in a variety of spiritual activities, but the monist cannot understand spiritual variety. The conclusion is that although the powerful and the power are one and the same, within the energy of the powerful, there are varieties. In those varieties, there is a difference between one's personal self, between the types of the same category, and between types of different categories. In other words, there is always variety in the categories, which are understood as knowledge, the knower, and the knowable. Due to the eternal existence of knowledge, the knower and the knowable, devotees everywhere know about the eternal existence of the form, name, qualities, pastimes, and entourage of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Devotees never agree with the monist preaching of oneness. Unless one adheres to the conceptions of the knower, the knowable, and knowledge, there is no possibility of understanding spiritual variety, nor can one taste the transcendental bliss of spiritual variety. The philosophy of monism is an adjustment of the Buddhist philosophy of voidism. In a mock fight with Sri Advaitacharya, Sri Nityananda Prabhu was refuting this type of monistic philosophy. Vaishnavas certainly accept Lord Sri Krishna as the ultimate one, and that which is without Krishna is called Maya, that which has no existence. External Maya is exhibited in two phases: Jiva Maya, the living entities, and Guna Maya, the material world. In the material world, there is Prakriti, material nature, and Pradhan, the ingredients of material nature. However, when one becomes Krishna conscious, material and spiritual variety do not exist. An advanced devotee like Prahlad Maharaj sees everything as one, Krishna. This, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna graha grihitatma naveda jagat idsham. Srimad Bhagavatam 7.4.37. One who is in full Krishna consciousness does not distinguish between things material and spiritual. He takes everything to be related to Krishna and therefore spiritual. By Advaya Jnana Darshan, Srila Advaitacharya has glorified pure devotional service. Srila Nityananda Prabhu herein sarcastically condemns the philosophy of impersonal monists and praises the correct non-dual philosophy of Sri Advaita Prabhu. Text 195. Nityananda Prabhu continued, quote, "You are such a monist, and now I'm eating beside you. I do not know how my mind will be affected in this way." End quote. Purport. Sangat Sanjayate Kama. Bhagavad Gita 262. One develops his consciousness according to society and association. As Srila Nityananda Prabhu admits, a devotee should be very careful when associating with those who are not devotees. When asked by a householder what the behavior of a devotee should be, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately replied, "Asat Sangha Tyaga E Vaishnava Achara, Sri Sangi Eka Asadu Krishna Bhakta Ara." Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 2287. A Vaishnava, a devotee, should simply discard intimate association with non-devotees. In his Upadeshamrita, Srila Rupa Goswami has described the symptoms of intimate relationship in this way. Datati pragrinati guyam akyati prichati bunke bujayate chaiva sad vidham priti lakshanam. The words bunkte bujayate indicate that one should eat with devotees. One should carefully avoid eating food offered by non-devotees. Indeed, a devotee should be very strict in not accepting food from a non-devotee, especially food prepared in restaurants or hotels or on airplanes. Srila Nityananda Prabhu's reference in this connection is meant to emphasize that one should avoid eating with Mayavadis and convert Mayavadis like the Sahajya Vaishnavas who are materially affected. Text 196. Thus they both went on talking and praising one another, although their praise appeared negative, for it appeared as if they exchanged ill names. Text 197. Thereafter, calling all the Vaishnavas, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu distributed Mahaprasad as if sprinkling nectar. At that time, the mock fight between Advaitacharya and Nityananda Prabhu became more and more delicious. Text 198. After taking their lunch, all the Vaishnavas stood up and chanted the holy name of Hari, and the resounding noise filled all the upper and lower planetary systems. Text 199. After this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu offered flower garlands and sandalwood pulp to all his devoted personal associates. Text 200. The seven persons headed by Dhira Damodara who were engaged in distributing prasad to others then took their meals within the room. Text 201. Govinda saved some remnants of food left by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and kept them carefully. Later, one portion of these remnants was delivered to Haridas Thakur. Text 202. The remnants of food left by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were later distributed among devotees who begged for them, and finally Govinda personally took the last remnants. Text 203. The fully independent Supreme Personality of Godhead performs various types of pastimes. The pastime of washing and cleansing the Gundicha temple is but one of them. Text 204. The next day marked the performance of the festival of Nitrotsavat. This great festival was the life and soul of the devotees. Purport. After the bathing ceremony of Lord Jagannath during the fortnight before the Rath Yatra ceremony, the body of Lord Jagannath, having been washed, needs repainting. This is known as Angaraga. The Nitrotsava festival, performed gorgeously in the early morning of the Nava Yovana day, constitutes the life and soul of the devotees. Text 205. Everyone was unhappy for a fortnight because they could not see the deity of Lord Jagannath. Upon seeing the Lord at the festival, the devotees were very happy. Text 206. On this occasion, greatly happy, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took all the devotees with him and visited the Lord in the temple. Text 207. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to visit the temple, Kashishwar walked in front, checking the crowds of people, and Govinda walked in the rear, bringing the sannyasis pitchers filled with water. Purport. The karanga is a kind of water pot especially carried by Mayavad sannyasis and generally carried by all other sannyasis. Text 208. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went toward the temple, Paramananda Puri and Brahmananda Bharati walked in front of him, and at his two sides walked Sri Damodara and Advaitacharya. Text 209. With great anxiety, all the other devotees followed them into the temple of Lord Jagannath. Text 210. Out of great eagerness to see the Lord, they all neglected the regulative principles, and just to see the Lord's face, went to the place where the food was offered. Purport. There are many regulative principles of deity worship. For example, one is not allowed to enter the room where food is offered to Lord Jagannath. However, in this case, being very anxious because of not having seen the Lord for 15 days, all the people overruled the regulative principles and entered the room. Text 211. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very thirsty to see the Lord, and his eyes became like two bumblebees drinking the honey from the lotus-like eyes of Lord Jagannath, who is Krishna himself. Text 212. The eyes of Lord Jagannath conquered the beauty of blossoming lotus flowers, and his neck was as lustrous as a mirror made of sapphires. Purport. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu usually saw Lord Jagannath from a distance, standing behind the column of Garuda. However, upon not seeing Lord Jagannath for 15 days, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu felt great separation from him. In great anxiety, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu crossed the meeting hall and entered the room where food was offered, just to see the face of Lord Jagannath. In verse 210, this action is called Maryada Laghana, and violation of the regulative principles. This indicates that one should not come very near a superior. The deity of the Lord and the spiritual master should be seen from a distant place. This is called Maryada. Otherwise, it is, as it is said, familiarity breeds contempt. Sometimes coming too near the deity or the spiritual master degrades the neophyte devotee. Personal servants of the deity and the spiritual master should always be very careful, for negligence may overcome them in their duty. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's eyes have been compared to thirsty bumblebees, and Sri Jagannath's eyes have been compared to blossoming lotus flowers. The author has made these comparisons in order to describe Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu while the Lord was deeply absorbed in ecstatic love for Lord Jagannath. Text 213. The chin of the Lord, tinged with buff color, conquered the beauty of a badhuli flower. This increased the beauty of his mild smiling, which was like lustrous waves of nectar. Text 214. The luster of his beautiful face increased at every moment, and the eyes of hundreds and thousands of devotees drank its honey like bumblebees. Text 215. As their eyes began to drink the nectarian honey of his lotus face, their thirst decreased. Thus their eyes did not leave him. Purport. In the Laghu Bhagavatamrita 1.5.538, Srila Rupa Goswami has described the beauty of the Lord in this way. Asamana nordva madhurya tarangam mrita varidi jangama stavaro lasi rupa gopendra nandana. Quote, the beauty of the son of Maharaj Nanda is incomparable. Nothing is higher than his beauty, and nothing can equal it. His beauty is like waves of an ocean of nectar. This beauty is attractive both for moving and for non-moving objects. End quote. Similarly, in the Tantra Shastra, there is another description of the Lord's beauty. Kandarpakoti arbuda rupa shobha nirajya padabja nakam chalasya katrapi adrista struta ramya kantir dhyanam parananda sutasya vaksye. Quote, I shall relate the supreme meditation upon Lord Sri Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj. The tips of the toes of his lotus feet reflect the beauty of the bodies of unlimited millions of cupids, and his bodily luster has never been seen or heard of anywhere. End quote. One may also consult Srimad Bhagavatam 10:29-14 in this connection. Text 216. Thus, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees enjoyed transcendental bliss upon seeing the face of Jagannath. This continued to midday. Text 217. As usual, there were transcendental blissful symptoms in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's body. He perspired and trembled, and a constant flow of tears fell from his eyes. However, the Lord checked these tears so that they would not disturb his seeing the face of the Lord. Text 218. Their looking at the face of the Lord Jagannath was interrupted only when he was offered food. Afterward, they would again look at it upon his face. When the food was being offered to the Lord, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu performed his kirtan. Text 219. Feeling such great pleasure upon seeing the face of Lord Jagannath, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu forgot everything. The devotees, however, took him to his lunch at noontime. Text 220. Knowing that the car festival would take place in the morning, all the servants of Lord Jagannath were doubling their offerings of food. Text 221. I have briefly described the pastimes of the Lord in washing and cleansing the Gundicha temple. By seeing or hearing these pastimes, even sinful men can awaken their Krishna consciousness. Text 222. Praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath, always desiring their mercy, I, Krishnadas, narrate Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, following in their footsteps. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 12, describing the washing and cleansing of the Gundicha temple.
Gopal Champu, Chapter 8, Binding Krishna. When the cowards seated themselves in the assembly on another day, in the early morning, Snigdhakanta spoke as follows. Once at the end of Kartik month, joyful Yashoda saw that Krishna was sleeping with his eyes, which were beautiful as blue lotuses, closed. Caressing him gently with her hand, as he lay on the bed, she let him sleep. Slowly leaving the bed and going outside the room, she quickly tied up her cloth to engage in household chores in the early morning and began churning yogurt. On that day, Rohini mounted a chariot with Balaram and went to the house of Upananda by a special invitation as if pulled by ropes of affection. The affectionate servants came to complete their work. They were busily engaged because of a great festival of Indra traditional in the family, respected by all people, which would be held at the beginning of the last month of the year, Magha Shirsha. While the servant women were arriving for their jobs, Yashoda was carefully engaged in churning the yogurt and singing while thinking that today her son was sleeping late. Absorbed in her son, she began singing about his pastimes while gazing at his face. Shukadev has said, "One day, when Mother Yashoda saw that all the maidservants were engaged in other household affairs, she personally began to churn the yogurt. While churning, she remembered the childish activities of Krishna, and in her own way she composed songs and enjoyed singing to herself about all those activities. She had a belt shining with jewels on her blue swaying cloth, and was decorated with attractive jingling bells. She churned the yogurt with her two hands repeatedly while looking at the face of her son, who was just beginning to open his eyes." Her song: "O Tilak of the family of Nanda, you are living in Braj. Since the people here have done hundreds of pious acts, you have given them great happiness. Seeing your actions, the eyes become joyful. By the great festival arising from this bliss, you give bliss to all the cowherds, O King of Gokul, filled with the auspicious action of killing Putana. You engaged in auspicious acts after overturning the cart, which destroyed the steadiness of our hearts. The Supreme Lord has brought you back after he killed the whirlwind demon. You crawl about in the beautiful yard. Lotus-eyed child, you are the greatest piety. You show the greatest skill at dancing and playing. You appear most attractive when you hold on to the calves' tails. You show false greed in arguing for fun with the elders. O Krishna, always give happiness to me, your mother. Stay in this house always. Please reveal your playful antics and quickly grow. You showed the power of the Lord, causing astonishment and showing the universe within you. May your body remain without old age and death, and become the cause of joy by worshiping the Lord." The ocean of beauty woke up and immediately began crying. Getting up, he went to his mother. He appeared to his mother and others as follows. Breathing heavily, bending his limbs, rubbing his eyes, he cried, "Mother, mother." Hearing the sound of churning, he walked on faltering feet to his mother. When Krishna stopped the movement of the churning rod with his soft words filled with affection, caused by his mother's caring attitude, Yashoda fed the infant milk. When the milk flowed from Yashoda like monsoon rains, Krishna was like the chataka bird drinking those showers. When Krishna had only half finished drinking, Yashoda, thinking that the milk on the next room may be boiling over, put Krishna down and went to the other room, thinking that she may drop him since she was moving very fast. Madhukanta said, "How could this happen? How could she be thinking of leaving her son, who was becoming thin from hunger, since she was the spotless example of love for her child?" Snigdhakanta spoke with a smile. "First hear this, since Yashoda was the perfection of motherly affection." Madhukanta said, "What is that?" Snigdhakanta said, "His parents thought, 'This is my son,' and from birth had possessiveness with complete disregard for their own bodies and houses. Brahma has said the following concerning all the people of Braj, what to speak of his parents. So what is left for you to give these devotees of Vrindavan, whose homes, wealth, friends, dear relations, bodies, children, and very lives and hearts are all dedicated only to you?" Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, 14th Chapter, Text 35. Since the milk and yogurt were for Krishna, they were even more attractive than Krishna. This is the special nature of her love. This was her way of thinking. Enduring great difficulties, she was not aware of her household chores that should be done. She thought more of Krishna as her son than her body and house. Making Krishna the object of her compassion, she thought that her duty was to serve Krishna. Krishna also understood that her scolding and punishment were her show of affection. What more can be said of her affectionate caring for him? When the inhabitants of Braj became angry with him, it increased their love for him, just as sometimes the fire of lightning is seen in the thick cloud. The mother and son mutually benefit each other. When she went to take the milk off the fire, she spoke in joy. "I worship you with arati, but for a moment please protect the churning pot. After taking care of the milk, I will come as quickly as I can." While she quickly went from the churning place and then returned, the cloth covering her breasts completely sprinkled the path with milk. But because his desire was obstructed, Krishna became very upset. His lips red with anger, and tears flowing from his eyes, he began to cry. He broke the pot with some stones, but did not touch a particle of the butter. Poets describe this. The white moons of his teeth became red like his lips, and his eyes, like chakora birds, became filled with tears. With his two lotus hands he destroyed the yogurt pot, showing his strength. The yogurt within remained intact. Krishna then created another festival. He carefully took the ghee from the hanging pot and began eating it. He then took the ghee pot away through a side door. Carefully he struck the door panel to loosen the bolt and then entered the storeroom, bolting the door after entering. Using a wooden bed to climb, he stole the ghee and then fled while no one was looking. Yashoda, seeing the milk had thickened on the stove, took the pot off and quickly returned to her son. Knowing the type of actions of her son, she felt both anger and joy, and then smiled. Though she was worried at first, a message from the sky caused her to smile. The voice from the sky said, "The baby bee, being very thirsty, has not been fully satisfied with honey, and has thus broken the lotus bud. On breaking the lotus and seeing only the contents flow out, without honey, the bee has gone to another lotus and obtained honey. Moreover, you have shown skill in taking the milk off the fire, but you will be praised more for your ability to pacify the anger of your son." Hearing this, she smiled. Seeing his footprints of buttermilk, which indicated the path of his theft, by her own means she was able to unbolt the door and then acted as follows. When Yashoda left the room and saw that her son had made mischief, she followed him and then saw him as he was looking around with fearful eyes. He was moving his eyes about. "I have stolen the ghee, and my mother will see me. How will I meet her gaze?" Fearing her, he moved his eyes from ear to ear. He overturned a mortar and sat on it while feeding monkeys as his eyes moved here and there. Seeing him do this, Yashoda smiled slightly and became filled with astonishment. She silently approached in order to catch her thieving son, but seeing her he began to flee. It is well known that a thief has 100 eyes, whereas the owner of wealth has only 2 eyes. The proud monkeys became full from eating the butter. Yashoda took a stick and, covering it with cloth, approached. Seeing her, he quickly climbed a tree. She ran after her fleeing son, but the flowers fell from her bound hair. "King of thieves, where are you going?" His beauty increased by his indistinct smiling and crying. She pursued him to catch him, but she could not catch him, just as a group of clouds going west by the wind cannot catch a small cloud going to the east. He ran where he thought his mother could not follow him. Thinking no one else was around, she followed him. When he ran without looking back, she could not catch him. When he looked back in fear, she was able to catch him with her hand. He used his eyes to try to find some way of escaping, and began weeping to remove his mother's anger. He made his body falsely tremble out of boldness, but he could not wipe out his bad behavior. When she came face to face with him, he tried to cover his ghee-soaked limbs by smearing himself with dust. Seeing this, Yashoda said, "If you want to steal in this house, then look at this stick in my hand." When her lotus-eyed son was overcome with fear on hearing this, she threw down her stick. "Mother, do not beat me." With a hidden smile, she said, "But you are a thief." In this way, a quarrel began. "Ah, you are the king of thieves. Your father's lineage is all thieves." In this way, the mother argued with the infant who had stolen the ghee. How did the yogurt pot break? It was the Supreme Lord's stick. Who gave ghee to the monkeys? He who created monkeys gave it to them. I think that you always taste and eat the fresh ghee meant for sacrifices. After Yashoda scolded the infant as a thief, her heart softened. Smiling, but with anger, she said, "You should tell your secret and give up your pride." When his mother said this, her son began weeping. "When you ran quickly, the pot broke because of being struck by your anklets. What is my fault in this?" Inspired by the Lord, the monkeys entered the house to steal. When they pulled at the ghee, I caught it. What is my fault? Seeing you holding a stick, I ran away like a thief. Seeing that I was frightened, you tried to mercilessly beat me without justice. Yashoda spoke with repentance. O best of thieves with clever words, though you are the son of the king of Braj, you are fond of monkeys and have the nature of a monkey. Fearful and to give fear to his mother, he said, "If I am a monkey, then I will go to the forest and stay there." His mother began to worry with fear. Who can understand him? A proud child will do this. I must tie him up to prevent this, since I am alone and I cannot continue to pay attention to both the house and this child. But she spoke aloud. O thief who bewilders everyone with your restless eyes, do not think of avoiding me. After binding you up, I will go to the house quickly. If you show your strength, then steal something else. When she began tying him up, he became so angry that he breathed with a hissing sound. He said, "Rohini, where have you gone with Balaram? Because you are not here, she is binding me up. Please come quickly." Because Rohini was far away, she could not hear, but other women who were neighbors, who had previously scolded him, heard his cries and came. They laughed and said, "Has he done anything at your house?" So that she would remember her own previous words. Ignoring their words, she took an old string from her hair and began binding him around the waist to the mortar near the outer door, just as Rudra's followers bound up Daksha to teach him a lesson. But the string was 2 fingers too short. She took another silk string from her hair and tied the two together, but still the string was 2 fingers short. Even when the other women gave up the churning rope, she could not tie him up. Just as a cloud touching a far mountain appears not to touch it, so the rope around his waist appeared to be 2 fingers too short. The other women laughed and said, "O Yashoda, we told you previously that he makes the original thief Kalpalaka tremble by his great power of bewilderment. He shows himself to be a thief, taking joy in eating stolen goods." She said, "He was born at the wrong time, thus he does not know good from bad. But I think you have been put under a spell, since internally you are prejudiced against him, but externally you show yourselves differently." Laughing, they said, "Falling at your feet, we swear that we are not under some amazing spell." She then began to think, according to Garga's words, the Lord's powers are covering this boy, and he does not know what is happening. She repeatedly brought churning ropes from the women's houses to see the limits of astonishment and tried to bind him up, but found no way to do so. Attempting to bind her son, she found no end in this endless task. Perspiration flowed over her limbs and her hair became loose. As much as Krishna made efforts to show his stubbornness, Yashoda's attempts became useless, as if under the influence of bad planets. It is understood that when his mind became moved by her fatigue, he became bound up by the first 2 ropes alone. All the other ropes became unnecessary. A performer of actions, Yogamaya, acting according to his desires, created this incident for his mother, which appeared like some illusion. Yogamaya performed such acts daily. Having tied up Krishna, she lengthened the rope with the other ropes and tied him to the mortar. Having tied him up and showing harshness to him to teach him, his mother went to do her household chores with the other women who were laughing. She placed other boys around him to protect him. When the women left, he pretended to cry for a while. Then he became joyful at the prospect of moving the mortar to many places. Though he was tied up, with great faith, increased by being surrounded by the boys, he played with them while smiling, moved the mortar bit by bit, while they also laughed. He then had them go to the empty houses of the women and steal the butter hanging in pots. But he did not desire to free himself from the mortar using his hands or any instrument, in order to give joy by pulling the mortar. Then he saw the two Yamala Arjuna trees situated near the town gate, whose leaves were dancing in the wind. Gradually he made his way towards those trees. Snigdhakanta, in freely describing this incident of breaking the two trees, wanted to show not the Lord's power, but something else. Then, desiring to go to another place, he went along the path between the two trees, but the path was narrow between the trees and sloped down. The mortar became stuck between the trees. Desiring to pull down the two trees, he started pulling hard. A terrible sound arose from the trees, and he pulled the two trees down. All the inhabitants of Braj, other than the deaf, could not maintain their composure on hearing that sound. What was most astonishing, however, was that Krishna had broken the two trees, which were as hard as thunderbolts, but he could not break the bondage of affection he had with his mother. Poets praise this. I praise the child cared for by the women of Braj. He has a dark complexion, and his ankle bells jingle. He gives joy when he crawls. He produced a rough sound as he pulled the mortar over the earth. His eyes became restless as the curious, thunderous sound of the falling Arjuna trees. Hearing the fearful sound of the falling trees, the inhabitants remained in a fainting condition for a muhurta. Only the boys around Krishna did not faint. Experiencing the height of sweetness of his pastimes, they did not become frightened and remained immobile like painted pictures. Hearing that sound from far off, the villagers speculated on its origin and went towards the place. Arriving all at the same time and full of anxiety, they conversed with each other. How have those trees fallen without wind, without rain, without thunderbolts, without an attack by elephants? How is it possible for someone to uproot the trees when there is no one here? For that reason, everyone fainted on hearing that loud sound. They noticed that Krishna was near the trees and that he was smiling. Pulling the mortar, he was experiencing bliss in his actions. They surrounded him, saying, "How did this happen?"
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hello, dear devotees, thank you all very much for a delicious prasad. We're going down for beautiful journey in Damodara. Hari Hari Bol. Have a wonderful day. Full of Krishna consciousness.
Hare Krishna, Shila Gurudev, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Shila Gurudev.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for the association.
Enjoy your day. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Dandavat Pranam.
Hare
प्रतिमा माता जी, ये
Krishna.
भोग कैसे आएगा हम तक? महाप्रसाद लेना है. We want to eat now. Very hungry. Delicious prasadam.
Mataji Gurudev said for that we have to go back to Goloka. There we will enjoy feast. So we will see you in Radha Shunya class so that we can all together go to Goloka. Thank you so much everybody for joining in and for your enthusiastic participation. We pray that we can serve and please Srila Gurudev together and go back to Goloka to enjoy the eternal festival and the feast there. Hare Krishna, Srila Gurudev ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakti Vrinda ki jai,
Jai.
Kalpatarubhyascha kripa
कृपा सिंधु पतितानां पावन वैष्णव अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय.
sindhu.